I do. It's an amazing place. My family has been there absolutely forever. Came to the land in 1777. Yes, 1777. It doesn't sound right, but it is 1777. To what was, even then, a challenging place. There is something about this place that in basis, in DNA, is probably more challenging than other places. Morgan, I'm not going to skip a selfie later, so. But thinking about it, I'm thinking about my ancestors way back when. They all spoke Arabic as well as Hebrew. It was very natural for them. They cohabitated with the Arabs in Safed, in Nahalal, where my grandmother was born, everywhere. And it's not that it was easy. They had pogroms then, there were knifings and stabbings then. There was always a fight over this land. And I can tell you, I understand why. It's so beautiful. It's beautiful. There is something there that is truly mesmerizing to this day. I had a very unique privilege, I think. I was raised in Tel Aviv in the 1970s. Even though my first childhood memory is Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War in 1973 was actually the first war that Israel was actually surprised. We did not accept that war. We did not expect that war. We had intelligence was actually the other way around. And my first memory is a siren. My parents had a small radio, blue radio that I remember. And we were sitting, it was Yom Kippur, and we were sitting in the kitchen, not eating, even though I did not come from an observant family. My ancestors were very observant. And I remember the siren. And I remember my father picking me up, putting me on his shoulders, and we were running down to the shelter. Next time I saw him was 6 months later. I didn't recognize him. He had a beard, his glasses broke. That's my first childhood memory. The reason that I'm in the Knesset is because I did not want that to be the first child's memory that my kids have. I have a 10-year-old Jonathan and 4-year-old twins, Asaf and Alma. And unfortunately, it will be their first childhood memory. Because during Protective Edge last year, that's what my children experienced, the sirens going on and off. And my little ones who went to the kindergarten at that time, because you want to keep life as normal as possible, what they learned was how to become a little ladybug, just to make sure that they're not hurt by anything if anything falls anywhere close by. But in those, thinking about Protective Edge, which was the last known, I would say, combat, and my own first childhood memory, Israel is an amazing country, an amazing place to live in. It sounds like we're always in the middle of something going on. And it's true, it's very, very hectic. We're struggling, we're still struggling. But on the other hand, can you imagine a 67-year-old country with that amount of companies that are listed in the New York Stock Exchange? Can you imagine how many startups Israel was able to initiate? Can you imagine the education that we have managed to create, including the Technion, including the Weizmann Institute? Can you imagine a country as small as we were at the beginning of the 1990s, getting 1 million newcomers coming in, at first living all in trailers, and you have to house them all, and you have to make sure that they all have employment. Can you imagine a country of that size having health care for all, trying to have welfare for all? And to this day, it's not trivial. I was thinking about the 1970s because I think what I got from Rabin most, and he was I'm not sure how much you know about him. I loved him very much. But the thing about him was that he did not expect to be admired. He heard criticism, he was okay with criticism. The thing about him was, and I got from him most, is leadership in the sense that when I first started working with him, it was very, very clear that he has a vision for Israel. And that is probably the most challenging thing for any leader to have. And how do you execute that vision? In the 1970s, when I was growing up, middle class in Israel was everyone. It was very, very obvious. It was easy to be middle class in Israel. You had a home, which you didn't have trouble buying. If you had a job, which was usually the case. I grew up in the northern part of Tel Aviv. Now it would be considered like kind of posh, like kind of ritzy. It wasn't. It was just a regular place where regular people were living in, enjoying the same things, going to the same theaters, going to the same cinemas. There weren't so many in Israel at that point. It was a regular place, in spite of everything, in spite of the security challenges. In the beginning of the 1990s, Rabin resolved to make a difference. Israel's economy was just in its very, very initial, it was really baby steps at that point, even though we already had industry and we already had things going for us, but still we were a developing country. And he decided that he needs to make a difference. And he knew that only if Israel goes into any kind of process with the Palestinians, and I was going to say, if you remember, if you recall, you probably don't. Yitzhak Rabin was Minister of Defense during the first uprising in the West Bank, in the territories. And he was very definitive about the way he expected the army to take care of that uprising, because he had no choice. That was his job. He was Minister of Defense. But in the beginning of the 1990s, another thing happened, which is probably also a scar in American history. That was the first Iraq War, the first war in the Gulf. And getting missiles over Tel Aviv made it very, very clear that the next war is not only about armored corps or about infantry. It's about long-haul missiles. And I remember following him when he was in his primaries against Shimon Peres to become the leader of the Labour Party. And he started speaking about Syria, and he spoke about the Palestinians, but mostly he spoke about changing the priorities in Israel, making sure that we have equal opportunities in Israel for people who live in Tel Aviv and for people who live in the Negev and Galilee. Because the tradition